The wind screamed through the trees like a woman in mourning. Snow fell in thick, blinding sheets, blanketing the world in silence except for the creak of pine branches under its weight and the crunch of boots breaking a trail through drifts knee-deep. Eliza Kane pressed forward, clutching her worn rifle, breath rising in ragged clouds. Something had spooked her traps. A fox wouldn't trigger 3 in a row, and a bear wouldn't be this quiet. She moved like a shadow between the trees, long coat whipping behind her, senses narrowed to the forest's rhythm. She'd lived alone for 5 years and knew these woods like her own heartbeat. That's why she stopped when she saw the trail, blood, smeared and partially buried, but fresh. Eliza crouched, fingers brushing the crimson-stained snow. It hadn't frozen yet. Then came a groan. Soft. Human. Her pulse quickened. She rose slowly, eyes scanning ahead. He was half buried under a fir tree, limbs askew like a broken puppet. Snow dusted his face and hair, but she could make out the rawness of his features. A beard just starting to form, blood caking one side of his scalp, lips split and trembling. His coat was torn at the shoulder, the fabric soaked through. She stepped closer, rifle raised. "You alive?" The man didn't move, didn't speak. But when she crouched beside him, he stirred, a twitch, a breath hitching. His eyes cracked open, pale blue and unfocused. Eliza studied him. No badge. No hat. A revolver still strapped to his leg. His face wasn't familiar, and in a town this size, that mattered. "I'm not here to finish you," she muttered, lowering the rifle. "But I'll be damned if I let you die this close to my door." He passed out before she finished binding his shoulder. Dragging him back was murder on her back, but she managed, straining against the weight and the deepening snow. By the time they reached the cabin, half-buried, logs iced over, chimney smoking, the man was barely breathing. She heaved him inside and slammed the door against the storm. The cabin was dim, lit only by the fire that had started burning low. She fed it quickly, then stripped off her wet coat and got to work. Water boiled on the stove while she cleaned the wound, biting her lip as she peeled back his coat to reveal bruises, old and new. A knife slash across his ribs. Bullet graze on the leg. Someone had tried to kill him, more than once. "Trouble walks on 2 legs these days," she said to no one, dabbing the cut on his temple. He murmured something, barely a whisper. Eliza leaned close. Ambush Creek, they knew. Who knew? His eyes fluttered. Bastards, they wanted silver. Then silence. He slumped back, unconscious again. Eliza exhaled slowly and sat back on her heels. She should have left him out there. Should have turned around, closed the door, and let nature take him back. But she couldn't. Not with the way he looked when he said they knew. She remembered that same look in the mirror the night she fled town. 5 years alone teaches you how to measure a man by what he doesn't say. And this one, whoever he was, carried secrets stitched into his skin. Outside, the wind howled louder. She checked the shutters, reloaded her rifle, and stoked the fire. If someone had chased him into her woods, they might not stop just because the snow made cowards of lesser men. She sat beside the fire, the heat licking at her face while the storm raged on. Every few minutes she glanced at him, still breathing, but shallow. She watched his hands, rough, calloused. A worker's hands. Maybe a rancher. But the revolver was polished and the boots were high quality, too nice for a farmhand. Too many contradictions. She hadn't had company in years. Not since the settlers drove her out, whispering of curses and mountain spirits when the crops failed and the cattle sickened. One dead baby. Just one, and they turned on her like wolves, blaming her for what couldn't be fixed. She didn't miss their eyes. Just the sound of voices that didn't come from inside her own head. A log shifted in the fire, snapping her attention forward. The man groaned again, turning slightly. His eyes opened, clearer now, and found her face. "You saved me." Eliza nodded slowly. "More like patched you up and kept you from freezing." He tried to sit, winced, and fell back with a grunt. "Where am I?" "My cabin. Northern Ridge." Half a day from Sand Hollow, if you walk it in good weather. His jaw clenched. They'll come. Who? He looked at her, really looked this time, his gaze intense despite the pain. The men who did this. I figured as much. They won't care who you are. If they think you helped me. He didn't finish the sentence. Eliza stood and moved to the stove. Already made peace with the idea of being hated. Doesn't scare me. He watched her move, brow furrowed. Name's James. Eliza, she said over her shoulder. Don't make me regret knowing yours. He managed the ghost of a smile. Wouldn't dream of it. She ladled soup into a chipped tin bowl and handed it to him. His fingers shook as he took it. She watched him eat, slow, careful, and didn't ask any more questions. He wouldn't talk until he was ready. When he finally did, it came out in pieces. He was a marshal, or had been. Rode into Sand Hollow on assignment, following a tip about stolen federal silver. Got too close. Found names, big ones. Ranchers, townsfolk, the sheriff. Men who ran the place. And they found out, she said quietly. He nodded. Ambushed me near the creek. I ran. Didn't think I'd make it this far. You didn't. I pulled your sorry hide out of the snow less than an hour from dying. James looked into the fire. Guess I owe you my life. You owe me nothing, Eliza said, voice hardening. Just don't bring your ghosts into my woods. He didn't argue. Just finished the soup and handed back the bowl. Night settled thick around them, the kind that smothered stars and made you believe the world ended at the edge of the firelight. James drifted into sleep again, his breathing more even. Eliza sat beside the door, rifle on her knees, watching the windows, the wind, the dark. She didn't sleep. Years alone teach you that peace is a lie people tell themselves before something breaks. And tonight, with a hunted man in her bed and killers possibly on her trail, that lie was wearing thin. When dawn came, pale and bruised behind snow-thick skies, she went outside to check her traps. 2 were sprung. 1 empty. 1 held a rabbit half frozen. She skinned it quickly and kept her eyes on the tree line. Tracks. Fresh ones. Just 1 pair, maybe 2. Close enough to the cabin to see smoke. Eliza returned inside, shut the door quietly, and bolted it. James sat up slowly. They're here. Not yet. But they've been watching. He nodded grimly, then looked around. You have horses? No. Snow's too deep for travel. We stay, we wait, or we fight. You always this calm? I've had worse company. James grinned faintly, then winced again. Wish I could help. You will, she said. If they come knocking, you just lie there and look half dead. I'll take care of the rest. You sure? She looked at him flatly. I lived through betrayal, a fire, and childbirth without medicine. I think I can handle a few rancher boys with shaky morals. He laughed then, soft and surprised. It sounded like something cracking open. You're not what I expected, he murmured. And you're more trouble than I wanted. Outside, snow fell like silence made solid. The cabin stood still against the mountain's breath, 2 fugitives inside, 1 hunted by men, the other haunted by memory. The fire crackled. Eliza sat back in her chair and rested the rifle across her lap, eyes never leaving the door. She had a feeling this was only the beginning. The fire burned low by mid-morning, casting long shadows that danced across the worn log walls. Eliza stood near the window, half shuttered against the snow glare, watching for movement beyond the tree-line. Her breath fogged the glass. Silence reigned outside. Inside, it was thick with memory. James stirred on the cot, limbs moving with the weight of pain and half-rest. He was healing, but slow, too slow for a man whose past might crash through the door at any hour. His eyes opened, met hers. Something unreadable passed between them. Not trust. Not yet. But maybe it's root. Do you ever sleep? He asked, voice hoarse. Not when strangers are under my roof. She moved away from the window, and tossed another log into the fire. He tried to sit but groaned and fell back. You got a mean sense of hospitality. I gave you a bed and didn't shoot you in your sleep. That's the best offer you'll get this side of the ridge. James chuckled, but it ended in a cough. Eliza poured hot water into a cup, crushed a pinch of dried herbs from a tin, and handed it over. He sipped, winced at the bitterness. What is this? Something awful that'll keep your lungs from turning black. He nodded and drank anyway. The wind pressed against the cabin like an intruder testing the hinges. The roof creaked, and snow thudded to the ground in clumps. Eliza stood near the fireplace now, arms crossed. She hadn't spoken much since daybreak. James studied her, eyes sharp behind the bruises. She was younger than he'd thought, 30 maybe, but carried herself like someone who'd lived 3 lives already. Her hands were rough, her gaze too steady. Everything about her said don't ask, but his instincts said look closer. You said you've had worse company, he said finally. Worse than a hunted lawman with a bounty on his head? Eliza glanced at him, jaw tight. Then she looked away, as if the fire might distract her. You ever bury a man who deserved better? And walk away because staying meant dying too? James's throat tightened. I've buried plenty. But did you run? He didn't answer. I did. Her voice dropped low. 5 years back. Husband died slow from a cough that turned his lungs to mush. Town watched me sit by his bed every damn day. Then the crops failed. A kid died. A cow dropped dead with its legs bent wrong. They needed a reason. I was too different. Too quiet. Had my grandmother's eyes. She was Apache. They remembered that when they needed someone to blame. James's fingers clenched around the cup. They burned our barn, Eliza said. I ran with nothing but a knife, a horse, and a month of grief clawing at my throat. Settled up here. Figured the mountain was cruel, but honest. Silence swallowed the space between them. The fire popped softly, like it knew when not to interrupt. I didn't kill their kid, she added, as if it mattered. As if saying it aloud could change the stain time had set. I know, James said simply. Eliza looked at him, startled not by the words, but by how certain he sounded. He set the cup down. I've seen guilt before. Yours doesn't smell like it. She studied him, and something in her shoulders eased. Just a little. You said they ambushed you at the creek. What were you chasing, exactly? James leaned back, exhaled. A shipment of silver meant for the Denver Mint went missing 6 months ago. Tracked it through rail reports and mail logs, ended up in Sand Hollow. Only it never reached the bank. Went straight to a storage shed owned by the mayor's cousin. Eliza raised an eyebrow. That's convenient. Too convenient. Sheriff started watching me the second I stepped into town. I played it quiet. Drank at the saloon. Asked questions without asking. Took 2 weeks, but I found the ledger. Proved the money changed hands. Names were all there. And they tried to kill you for it. He nodded. They don't just want the silver. They want the silence. And they're scared of what I know. You still have the ledger? James hesitated. I buried it before I got jumped. Under an old pine tree near the split in the creek trail. They think I had it on me. That's why they're chasing. They need to be sure it's gone. Eliza stared into the fire, weighing everything he said. If he was lying, he was damn good at it. But something about his voice, steady, worn, rang true. You plan to go back for it? I have to. It's the only proof. You won't make it in your condition. And if they find you first. I don't have time to heal, Eliza. They'll come here eventually. If not today, then tomorrow. She turned from the fire, pacing now. The cabin was small, one main room, loft above, kitchen nook tucked in the corner. It had been safe, hers. But his presence changed everything. The air felt tighter. The shadows longer. You're bringing war into a place I've kept quiet for years. James didn't apologize. Instead, he asked, why didn't you let me die? Eliza paused mid-step. Because I'm not like them. James nodded, understanding there was more in that sentence than she'd ever say aloud. That evening, the wind slowed. The snow let up for the first time in 2 days, and pale light filtered through the clouds. James sat propped on the cot, rifle resting across his lap. Eliza sharpened her knife near the hearth. Neither spoke for a long time. Then James said, "I had a brother once. Jesse. Younger. Wild as a fox. Thought he was faster than bullets." Eliza glanced up. "He got in with the wrong crowd. Ended up robbing a stagecoach near Durango. When I found him, he was bleeding out, shot twice in the gut. Said he didn't regret a thing. Said the world made him that way. Did you believe him?" James stared into the fire. "Some days I still do." They lapsed into silence again, but now it was different, shared, not empty. When the knock came, it wasn't loud. Just 3 rap. Calm. Measured. A sound that made Eliza's spine go stiff. She stood slowly, nodded once to James. He clicked the hammer back on his revolver, breathing steady. She approached the door, rifle ready, boots silent on the wood floor. Another knock. Then a voice, slick as oil. "Ma'am, we're just passing through. Cold out here. Looking for a lost friend. You haven't seen a stranger come limping through, have you?" Eliza said nothing. James tensed. "We ain't law, miss. Just friends worried sick. Wouldn't want him getting hurt out here." She stepped to the side of the door. "No strangers here. Mind if we look around?" "I do." A pause. Then, "You got a smart mouth for a woman alone in the woods." Eliza raised her voice. "I've buried men for less." Silence. Then the crunch of boots in snow, retreating. Fading into the trees. She didn't move until the last sound vanished. Then she turned to James. "They know." He nodded grimly. "And they'll be back," she said. "Not knocking next time." The cabin was no longer a refuge. It had become a fuse waiting to be lit. James tried to stand. Eliza was beside him instantly, catching his arm. "You're not ready." "I will be," he said through gritted teeth. "Because if I'm not, we both die." Eliza held his gaze. Something passed between them again. This time it wasn't uncertainty. It was resolve. She helped him to a chair, then moved to the shelf, pulling down the tin box where she kept her father's old map. She unfolded one on the table, fingers tracing the route. "If we leave before dawn, we can get to the creek trail by midday. You'll need help digging." James looked up, surprised. "You're coming?" She nodded. "You saved my fire from dying, Marshal. I figure it's my turn to carry the flame." He smiled for the first time, wide and real. "Then let's get your rifle ready." Outside, the snow began to fall again, soft and slow. But inside the cabin, something had shifted. The past no longer ruled. The fight had begun. And neither of them would face it alone. The stars had barely blinked into the sky when they left the cabin. James moved with a limp, but his pace was steady, fueled by grit and something stronger, fear sharpened into purpose. Eliza led the way, rifle slung across her back, eyes scanning the ridge line as if the trees themselves might whisper secrets. A brittle wind clawed down the mountain pass, but they didn't speak. There was no room for words. Snow crunched beneath their boots. Each step drew them further from safety, deeper into the shadowed spine of the wilderness where only the desperate dared linger. James could feel his ribs burn with every breath. The wound beneath his bandages throbbed, but he forced it into the background. Eliza broke the silence first. "They'll come at dawn." James glanced at her. "How do you know?" "Because that's when men like that feel invincible. Light makes them bold." They crested a hill. Below, the forest opened into a clearing, and beyond it, the creek, half frozen and narrow. Pine trees loomed like watchmen. Eliza pointed with her chin. "There. Under that twisted pine. That's where you said you buried it." James nodded. "Left the ledger in a tobacco tin. 2 feet down." She knelt without a word and started to dig, fingers bare and swift. James lowered himself beside her, coughing but helping, pushing snow and earth aside. The tin emerged with a scrape of metal. Eliza brushed it off and handed it over. James pried it open. Inside, the notebook was still dry, bound in cracked leather. Ink had faded but remained legible. He thumbed through the pages, jaw tightening. Names, dates, bribes. Enough to hang a whole council. You said the mayor's cousin was involved. He owns the storage sheds. Signed off on a false shipping manifest. It's all here. They covered the hole and moved back toward the trees, taking a narrow trail that circled the base of the mountain. The plan was simple. Eliza knew of an old hunting cabin further west, forgotten by most, built into a hollow where sound died quickly. If they made it there, they could rest, regroup. If not, as they moved, James asked, "What happens after this?" Eliza didn't look back. "We get it to someone who'll listen." "And who would that be?" She stopped. "There's a preacher in Silvercross. Used to be a lawyer. Helps those the law won't. He's the one who smuggled me north years ago." James raised an eyebrow. "And you trust him?" "I don't trust many. But I owe him my life." The night deepened around them. Hours passed. An owl called out in the distance. Wind hissed through the needles. Then voices. Distant but rising. "They're close," Eliza whispered, crouching. "Too close." James peered down the slope. Flickers of torchlight moved through the trees below, 5, maybe 6 men. Riders, judging by the pace and spread. Moving uphill. Fast. "They'll cut us off if we follow the trail," he said. "There's another way." She led him up a steeper incline, over rocks slick with frost. Each footstep was a gamble. James stumbled once, biting back a groan. Eliza didn't stop, she couldn't. The two of them slipped between boulders and around fallen trees, hearts pounding in unison. Somewhere below, a man shouted, "He's here." "I saw tracks." Gunfire cracked, echoing off the cliff. "They're shooting blind," Eliza said. "Trying to flush us out." More shots. Bark splintered above them. James grabbed Eliza's arm and yanked her behind a thick oak. "Go," he urged. "I'll draw them." She stared at him like he'd gone mad. "You won't make it 10 feet alone. I'll buy us time." "You're not bait, Marshal." But the decision was taken from them. A rider burst from the trees below, torch in one hand, pistol in the other. James fired first, one shot. The man dropped, torch flaring in the snow like a dying star. That was all it took. Yells erupted. The chase was no longer cautious, it was bloodthirsty. They ran. Branches tore at them. Snow blinded. Eliza led them down a switchback trail, barely wide enough for 2 feet. A misstep meant a 50-foot fall. But the mob was behind them, howling like wolves with blood on their tongues. Then, gunfire again. A bullet ripped through James's coat. Eliza turned, raised her rifle, and fired twice. One scream. Then silence. They made it to the hunting cabin as dawn bled across the horizon, pink and cold. The cabin was smaller than hers, just 4 walls and a roof caved on one side. But it was shelter. They bolted the door and fell inside, chests heaving. "Help me block the windows," Eliza said. Together, they dragged what little furniture remained against the cracks. James slumped to the floor, sweat freezing on his brow. Eliza knelt beside him. "You're bleeding again." He nodded, too tired to speak. "I need to stitch it, or it'll open clean through." James didn't argue. She fetched a sewing kit and whiskey from a hidden corner. He bit down on leather as she worked. Neither spoke. When she finished, he lay back, eyes fluttering. "If I don't make it, you will. But if I don't, take the ledger. Get it to Silvercross. Burn the rest." She covered him with her coat and stood. Outside, the forest was still, unnaturally so. No wind. No birds. Then a voice rang out. "Eliza Hart. You've got something that don't belong to you." It was Garvey, the mayor's enforcer. Tall, cruel, with a smile that never touched his eyes. "Bring him out, and maybe we'll let you live." Eliza didn't move. James tried to sit. "You have to run." "I told you, I don't run anymore." She stepped to the door, rifle in hand. "I know you're out there, Garvey," she called. "With your toothless hounds and your pretty lies." Silence. Then a laugh. Still got that fire, don't you? Come closer, I'll show you how bright it burns. More laughter. Then a new voice, feminine, cold. Kill the man. Bring the girl. Alive if possible. James's heart sank. That's Councilwoman Laird. She's the one behind it all. Eliza didn't flinch. Footsteps crunched outside. Then came fire, liquid, thrown against the walls. Get ready to burn, someone jeered. She shot through the door, hitting the first man square in the chest. Flames rose on the outer wall. James struggled to his feet, dragging himself toward the ledger. If they burn this place, it's over. Eliza fired again. Another scream. But the cabin was catching. Smoke slithered in through the cracks. She turned to James. Out the back. They crashed through the broken wall, landing in the snow beyond. Smoke poured into the sky. Gunshots chased them as they scrambled through the underbrush, breath ragged. Then a shout. Garvey again. You can't run forever. Eliza turned mid-stride and shot him in the leg. He fell, cursing. They kept moving, smoke behind them, gunmen scattering. The forest closed in once more. Finally, they reached a hollow where the stream cut deep through stone. Eliza knelt, gasping. James dropped beside her. We can't keep running. She looked at the ledger. No. But we can finish what we started. They lay there, hidden by snow and brush. The mob was behind them now, confused, scattered, licking wounds. But not gone. Eliza unwrapped the ledger, pages glowing in the morning light. Silver Cross is 3 days west. James nodded slowly. We rest today. Move at night. They'll expect us to hole up or head back east. They'll never expect us to go through the Blizzard Pass. James smiled grimly. Then that's exactly where we go. She tucked the ledger into her satchel, fingers brushing over it like a prayer. They had lived. They had burned bridges. And they had lit a fuse. The mountain stood silent again, but the battle had only just begun. The wind howled through Silver Cross like a beast roused from slumber. Snow drifted down in lazy spirals, dusting rooftops, covering tracks, softening the edges of a town bracing for reckoning. Smoke rose from chimneys, and doors stayed shut. It was a quiet morning, too quiet for what was coming. Eliza and James stood at the edge of town, cloaked in frost and determination. James looked gaunt, every step a strain, but he stood straight. The leather-bound ledger sat in Eliza's pack, heavy as iron. They had traveled through the Blizzard Pass, nearly died twice, and hadn't spoken much since. What if he's not here? James asked. He'll be here. Eliza's voice was flat, certain. He always is. Preachers never missed a Sunday sermon, even when the roof leaked and the pews were bare. They walked down Main Street like ghosts returned. Windows shifted with curious eyes, then quickly shuttered. No welcome. No warmth. Only fear and memory. The chapel sat at the far end of the road, crooked and weathered but defiant. Smoke rose from its chimney. The bell, cracked long ago, leaned silently in its tower. Eliza pushed open the doors. Inside it was warmer. Lamplight flickered against wooden beams. A man in a worn black coat stood at the pulpit, arranging hymnals. He looked up, gray-bearded, tall, and sun-darkened. Eliza Hart, he said, a faint smile curving beneath tired eyes. Thought I heard the wind change. I need your help. You brought the ledger? She nodded and pulled it free, placing it gently on the pulpit. The preacher opened it, flipping through the pages, his expression hardening. I knew the council was dirty, he muttered, but this is poison painted in law's clothing. James leaned against a pew, breathing hard. Can you get it out? Publish it? Testify? The preacher looked at them both. I can. But truth's a spark in a powder keg. You drop this, and the town will blow wide open. People will die. People are already dying, Eliza said. And they'll keep dying if we don't do something. He gave a slow nod. Then come Sunday I'll read it aloud. In front of God and every man in Silver Cross. James sat down, wiping sweat from his brow. They'll try to stop it. They always do, the preacher said. But this time we let them come. They didn't have to wait long. That night the riders arrived, 10 men on horseback, led by Councilwoman Laird and Garvey, his leg bound, his hatred barely contained. They came not with torches but with warrants. The sheriff, who had long since sold his badge to fear, marched up the chapel steps, hat low. Eliza Hart, James Holloway, you're under arrest for harboring a fugitive, theft of public documents, and treason. Eliza stood in the doorway, arms crossed. What about murder? Bribery? Fraud? He flinched. Those are matters for the council. James coughed a laugh. They are the council. Laird stepped forward. She was draped in black furs, her face sharp as a hawk's. You have one chance. Hand over the ledger, and I'll let the preacher live. The old man behind the pulpit didn't flinch. You should have killed me years ago when you had the chance. Garvey moved to draw his gun. Eliza already had hers aimed. Don't, she warned. Tension cracked the air like lightning in dry brush. The townspeople had gathered now, watching from windows, lining the street. Whispers. Movement. Fear. But also something else. A man stepped forward from the crowd, old, hunched, missing an eye. She saved my boy from frostbite last winter. While you bastards drank brandy and gambled taxes. A woman followed. She buried my daughter when none of you would. One by one, voices rose. Then, bang. Gunfire. No one knew who fired first. Maybe Garvey. Maybe someone else. But once the shot rang out, chaos followed. Smoke. Screams. Eliza ducked back into the chapel, dragging James with her. The preacher flipped the ledger open and began to read aloud, voice like thunder. In the year of our Lord, payments were made to silence the starving, to bury the innocent, to poison the land for gold. Another shot tore through the door. Wood splintered. People screamed. James crawled behind the pews, pulled his revolver. We hold them. Long enough for the town to hear the truth. They already are, Eliza said and returned fire. Windows shattered. Horses screamed. Someone threw a lantern. Flames licked the outer wall. Inside, the preacher kept reading, louder now, voice cracking. Councilwoman Laird, signatory to every illegal shipment out of Rivermouth. Enforcer Garvey, compensated for silencing whistleblowers with force. Outside, townsfolk surged forward. No longer watchers, but fighters. They dragged Garvey from his horse. Laird ran, fled on foot toward the courthouse, only to be intercepted by 3 ranchers with rifles. Smoke thickened in the chapel. Eliza turned to the preacher. You have to get out. I'll burn with my truth if I must. No, you won't. Together, they burst from the side, carrying the ledger, dodging flame and ash. James stumbled, but the crowd caught him. The fire claimed the chapel, but not the words. By morning, the council was overthrown. Arrests made. The preacher, blackened with soot, handed the ledger to a traveling reporter headed for Tucson. It would print in every major paper west of the Rockies. Eliza stood on the hill above Silver Cross, rifle slung, watching smoke rise from the ruined chapel. James joined her, arm in a sling, face bruised. You did it. We did it. What now? She exhaled slowly. Now. I think I go home. Fix the roof. Cut more wood. He smiled. And if they come for you again? I'll be ready. But maybe, just maybe, they won't. The wind stirred the snow. Below, the town moved like something waking from a long sleep. Doors opened. Voices rose. Life returned. Behind them, the past still burned. But ahead, there was light. And for once, Eliza Hart wasn't running from the fire. She was walking straight through it.